Most of us are safe and warm, food in the refrigerator, clean sheets on our beds. These are simple comforts for some and are taken for granted by many. But on any given night, in one of the richest countries in the world, there are approximately 2 million people living an archaic form of human misery. A life that should no longer be tolerated in the greatest and most responsive democracy on earth. As a people, we should be shocked, and as a nation, we should be ashamed. Many of them are handicapped or sick, not only physically, but also mentally and emotionally. Others will become ill from problems like drugs, alcohol, or just the pain of living on the streets. No matter what the causes, addiction or mental illness, personal tragedy, loss of a job, the cure is complex. Each person is an individual story, but they have one thing in common. They are part of a community whose citizens somehow lost or abandoned the American dream. They are the poorest of the poor with nowhere left to go. They are at the bottom of the ladder and can get no lower. No one wants or needs them anymore. They are America's homeless.
I'm homeless. I'm harmless. Believe it or not, 7 years sober.
I think there's a growing recognition in the state legislature that after the period of deinstitutionalization and sort of in hand with a disinvestment in mental health, that we've created an enormous problem resulting in homelessness.
I would say about homelessness, never judge a person just because they're in a situation, and never look down on nobody because you could be in the same situation. And I lost everything in one day.
The richest nation in the world cannot claim prosperity across the board when so many of its society are sleeping on sidewalks, in cardboard boxes, and in doorways, and under bridges, and in the cold, mean, hard streets of America.
I guess what I need is like probably about 1 month in one place that I know that we've got covered, you know, because it's not like we do not work. It's not like that, but it's really hard for, especially a girl.
Yeah, I've seen people get killed out here. I've seen police officers in dumpsters. I've seen people just sexually molest people and stuff on the street, kill people. It's very frightening.
And, you know, all the taxpayers pay all this money. You know, $1,500 a day when I go to county jail because they arrest me because I don't have an identification. You know, it's all a farce. The American taxpayer ought to be alarmed at all this. Clean this up in just a couple of days, because that's all it would take. There's only, what, 25,000 people in a 6-square block, you know, with all the drugs they could get, $2 whores. I mean, this is obscene down here.
My wife divorced me, and I lost my house. I lost all of my cars, and I lost all of my money.
We need a continuous stream of funding to provide a place for people to come and get clean, get medical attention, get their meds, and to be in touch with a provider of some sort.
The homeless are broken into many different groups. There are just families who have fallen on hard times and can't pay the rent. There are people with substance abuse problems. There are people who are mentally ill on the streets. And so each group has its own needs and problems. And part of dealing, I think, with homelessness is to recognize the diversity of needs within that community.
Unemployment, housing, substance abuse, and mental illness as the 4 core and perhaps universal problems.
Many wind up dead, either in the deserts or mountains or in cities. Many are victimized, and it's a very, very sad situation.
Gruesome fact is that people are being ghettoed in a 50-square block area. Of course, some social services are there. They're in relative concentration. But the word concentration should also be used, it's a double-edged sword, to ghettoize them, to escort them, as the police and sheriffs do, from gentrified sections of town, leaving them off in downtown LA. If they get back out, they're arrested for sleeping on the sidewalks, for living on the sidewalks. They are then criminalized, declared outlaws. They are, in fact, a growing pariah underclass.
I've just found myself in a bad position where I ended up not having a place to live. I used to have a really cool roommate and just ran out of money and didn't have enough time to find a job. And
women and children account for about 25% of homeless people. There are more homeless families than probably in the last 100 years. The number of homeless families is increasing because time limits have been placed on federal welfare benefits.
Women with children that are homeless is very frightening. Those children are frightened. I'm frightened. I know I'm a woman and I'm frightened.
Because the Congress and the executive created this phenomenon of a mass of homeless women and children. It's only begun now. It's going to get worse. 5 months from now, 10 months from now, 2 years from now, it will be worse. And there is no federal solution on the horizon.
It's a breeding ground for drugs, killing, and you have babies living there, which is against the law that no child's supposed to live in on those conditions. In those conditions. There are rats there that got key cards.
Sundown. Nowhere to go. Turned in, turned out, turned away. Killing time in bus stations, wasting time in all-night laundromats, doing time in dirty clothes, picking through trash cans, hunting for food, looking for a bite, getting bitten by the cold, evicted from society, haunted by the dark, scared and alone. Wondering if you'll see the sunrise. Slipping into blackness with only a blanket. Dreaming of a better life. Wanting a pillow for your head. Searching for a little space to sleep and a place to be. Struggling to survive. Praying to God for help. Trying to sleep in bushes. Wishing the sun would rise. Waiting in an endless line to nowhere. It's the end of the line for you. Longing to go home. You are driven back into the shadows, away from the light of day. Crying on the inside, dying on the outside. Homeless on the streets of America.
I mean, that person on the street could be you, could be me. I mean, how many paychecks away nowadays are people from being homeless?
I fought in this country, and I'm having a hard time getting any money from them. I'm a Korean, Vietnam veteran, all right? Put in 26 years. Is that enough? Can't say no more, son.
From the point of view of the homeless person, I mean, there are survival problems. A homeless person needs to eat. A homeless person needs not to freeze to death. A homeless person needs, in an ideal world, needs a roof, needs a blanket. A homeless person also needs acknowledgement and needs to, the thing that all of us need and don't get enough of, and that's a sense of humanity from the people surrounding us. I actually think there's plenty of love in the world. There's just inappropriate expressions of love, and there's not enough acknowledgement. If people took a look, an honest, ruthlessly honest look at every homeless person that came within their view, they would act. They would do something about it. They wouldn't be able to just kind of wander along the other side of the road like that person that Jesus talked about.
You know, maybe 1 day or 2 days I don't have any kind of food to eat.
None of them like the street, especially not in the rain. They come in the rainy season, sopping wet socks, and then they're feet are going to get infected. It's a terrible way of life, and there's none of them that like it.
Expectation, I guess, is maybe too high, but I feel like we have a lot of great ideas in this country and a lot of resources, a lot of wealth. I'm just surprised we don't have a better handle on this, because I think you can provide health care for people, and it is possible to have adequate housing, but you have to have governments, local, state, federal, and everybody has to be looking at how do you create the housing, how do we expand the coverage for families, kids, from so everybody's covered with health insurance. And on a bigger level, I guess the whole poverty thing, which is that you have to have we have great wealth and we have great poverty, and I haven't solved that solution.
In Los Angeles, we have, perhaps in Los Angeles County, nearly 250,000 people per year who are at homeless for some period of time or another. On any given night, on the streets of LA are between 80 and 90,000 homeless. There's a 50 square block area of downtown called Skid Row, and it doesn't have anything like it in the Western world. It's more reminiscent of some of the more poverty-stricken regions where colonialism retreated and did not substitute anything of value.
Dealing, I think, with homelessness is to recognize the diversity of needs within that community, within that populace, and then really targeting our programs to those specific groups, so we address each issue discreetly rather than trying to have a blanket policy. It's not enough just to say, oh, let us build more shelters, although we need them, or let us do more programs to provide people a place to sleep when it's cold. You really have to get to some of the core issues, and that is poverty, sometimes domestic violence, addiction to drugs and alcohol, and a mental illness which is not being treated or assisted.
So it's a fallacy to think that you're going to get in a tent or under a box and have the kind of comforting rest that most of us as human beings require. And therefore, that is part of what I think the media has brought to light, and that is that this problem is not solved. And I think the media should continue to report on the circumstances of the street until the rest of the people in government get off their back ends and start doing more work to help solve this problem.
Most homeless people out here, my age, approximately 50, have done what they do, have been on that cocaine, not crack, wasn't no crack, cocaine.
And one of the great populations is at risk today is the homeless. And part of that is a factor that involves other aspects that police traditionally get involved in, such as drugs.
Place. I mean, you can just drive by and see exactly what's going on. The dope man's right outside the front door, so they cash their check and they come out and there's somebody that, has whatever they might want to buy.
Outside the check cashing place, there's people there to buy your food stamps. They buy them for $95. Okay, if you really hold out and you're really a smart wheeler dealer horse trader, you get $100 for $127 worth. Okay, every one of these people do that. Okay, because the money is worth much more than the food stamps. The food stamps can't do anything other than buy food. You get free food. Why are you going to buy food? So that gets you whatever you want to get. Whether it be beer, crack, whatever it keeps your sustenance down here.
Hey, they sell drugs up there on Fifth Street, and the police is right there.
Made me sick, and I got sick with the virus too, because I was depressed, and I started shooting up, and I was tired of people pushing me around and kicking me and spitting on me, and not giving me nothing in return. And if I try to help someone, they steal from me, and it's like, why can't we just all come together?
Compared to people out here because they're on drugs. All you gotta do is leave the drugs alone. You have a life again.
Messing with drugs and stuff, and all my life, my mom said, you need to make new friends. Sit out, boy, out and talk to the Lord. I don't know what else to do with you.
These people around here, all they want to do is use drugs, and I can't handle that. The only drug I use is my beer and nicotine, cigarettes. and everybody else smokes crack, and I don't like to be around it.
And I ended up on the streets, using drugs constantly, every day, doing anything I can to get it. Stealing, burglaries, jacking people. And I ended up in the penitentiary, spending 7 years. And coming out, looking for a new start in life. Actually, I found it. Thanks be to God.
Most of the people down here, and I say like 90% of people down here, because they smoke crack. If they wasn't smoking crack, they wouldn't be down here, period. That's the bottom line.
Which proves to me the person had to have something on the ball. That shit costs a lot of money. Had to have a hustle. Legitimate, illegitimate, don't make no difference. Illegal, legal, don't make no difference.
I mean, these people need this. I mean, I've been into drugs before. You need it.
About a third of homeless individuals do have a problem with substance abuse or with mental illness. The mental illness issue has been the focus of a lot of recent attention because of several incidents involving the LA Police Department. Over the past 4 years, we know that the LA Police Department has killed at least 37 mentally ill individuals that we know of in confrontations.
Hospitals, back and forth. Blackouts.
For any number of reasons, a lot of homeless and mentally ill individuals are now in jail. And so with the cooperation of the Sheriff's Department, I think there have been some excellent model programs proposed and currently underway that will address that issue.
Yeah, it seems like lately, and it may have something to do with some of the local county clinics closing, that there's again more of a crisis where people are homeless and sick. And what we're seeing, especially with the mental health piece, is there's not a lot of services to get them adequate and ongoing counseling and medication. And so what we see is this really sad loop of people showing up, need to be hospitalized, out of medication, severely mentally ill, that are then hospitalized. They try to stabilize them, then they're not quite, they don't really have enough programs to sort of maintain them, keep them on the medication. Maybe some of them even need a little bit of assisted living. And so there's this horrible loop we see where these folks are on the street, out of medication, picked up by the police, or they end up back in the hospital. They get them stabilized, they're back in the street, they run out of medication, it's this sad loop where there's not enough housing and there's not enough services. And we can provide a lot of care and help them get linked with some things, but it's got to be an ongoing maintaining of the counseling and the health care and the housing. But I think particularly for mentally ill patients, it's just a real sad loop of watching these folks suffer without all the services they need.
The Twin Towers facility is the name of the jail in the county of Los Angeles that has, as described, 2 large towers and 2,000 people reside in each tower. One tower is the mental illness tower where people who have problems mentally are housed, and that means that over 2,000 people in the jail system are essentially in a mental hospital, even though it's a jail. the largest in the United States. We give out 6,000 psychotropic drugs a day. Many of these people are homeless, and many of them can respond to treatment in manners that, if it occurred in the public sector, they wouldn't be in jail to begin with.
Let me do a rooster for you. Watch this. Get another shot of it.
Some of the main causes of homelessness that we encounter are mental problems. Quite a number of our clients have some kind of mental problem. Substance abuse. We have both people who are currently abusing drugs and alcohol, or those who did in the past and are subsequently not okay. They damage their brains in some way.
That's not the cause of homelessness, drugs and alcohol and mental illness. That's not it. I'm sorry. It would be great if that was it. It's easy to solve them kind of problems, I think the main reason why people are homeless is because of a society's economic, social, and political policies made by the rich at the top of society. It is not drugs and alcohol and mental illness. Drugs, alcohol, mental illness is a result of those economic, political, and social policies that are made at the top of our society.
Approximately 2 million people in America are homeless. These are some overlapping figures. About 1/3 are mentally ill. Another third are substance abusers, half of them having overlapping mental illness. The remaining third are ready or almost ready to work. About 15 to 20% of the homeless, and the largest growing segment are women, many with children. About 10% are teenage runaways and 6% elderly. Approximately 33% of the men who are homeless are veterans, and another 10% are former convicts.
I think that to say that people should be able to pull themselves up by their own bootstraps, I think is a very naive way to look at it, because I think that if people, especially if they have a substance abuse problem, drugs or alcohol, whether or not there's a situation of domestic problems, recent divorce, having lost their present place to live, any of these things alone can be very catastrophic. Of course, obviously losing a job or a place of employment. And if one of these is coupled with any of the other, then I just feel that it's very difficult for people to make their way back by themselves.
My mind, no, don't listen very good. What you tell me right now? Okay, don't listen.
I put 26 years in the Navy, okay? And I get a VA check from the government, and it goes to my daughter. She got hit by a car when she was 4 years old, and I promised my wife before she died of cancer that I would never take a check away from that child, and I never have. I won't.
Make the most of what you can with what you have, no matter what it is, and just be happy about it. You know, before I had everything material, but now I don't have anything material, but I have hope. You know, I'm happy inside. I'm frustrated right now, but I'm happy because I know I got a life after this, and I don't know if that means anything to you or not. You know, it's a big thing to know where you're going after you die. You know, it took me 7 years in prison to learn that. You know, maybe when I rebuild, someone will be able to hear my story and realize the same thing. You know, and they won't have to lose everything like I did. I'm only speaking from the heart.
I'm as smart as some people, you know. I can read, and I know how to think. I've got a brain. I know how to think.
I look back at him, the man
across the seat on the floor. I slept okay too. I had on my coat. My kids had on their coat.
You definitely want to quit. I mean, it used to be a time where most of the people out here were transients, alcoholics. It's not like that now.
No, I didn't think this could ever happen to me, so.
Well, the only thing they can do just Social Security Administration give me the money every month, but I don't receive it.
Just give it up and you'll find yourself, either using drugs or find yourself with a bottle up to your mouth.
I may be living in a tent and go around dumpster diving to recycle what I can. Maybe sometimes I try to spread a little cheer. Some people call me Smiley up at the freeway off-ramp because I have a sign that says smile. Makes everybody wonder what you're up to. Or I've got another one that says smile. It might make your coworkers think you got a raise. And I don't ask people for money, they just, whatever they feel like giving me, I get more out of seeing the smiles every day.
Well, we've been living in vans and cars for about almost 2 years.
That just breaks my heart to see this kind of stuff. And it's like this woman, 5 years. 5 years.
Now, because the longer the homeless stay on the street, the harder it is to convince them to ever come back to a middle-class society again. The strictures are too big, the rewards are too small, and by that time they have to defend themselves against the onslaught of fate, have developed a psyche that is one of a wall, a barbed wire fence that the individual builds around themselves to protect themselves from the outside world.
I needed some man. I need to find some peace because of the person and the individual I am. I'm not a damn fool. Mathematician, very educated man.
So the weekends are hard, nights are really long, it's lonely. The loneliness is probably what I think probably gets to most people, I would imagine, if you're by yourself, which I am most of the time, so. But other than that, that's pretty much it.
I'm shooting drugs, and I'm very sick, and I'm mentally sick too.
Well, the days are different, it all depends on what's going on. Sometimes I'll go down, some of us donate plasma. I'm in this assessment program with the JWCH medical facility. I got 2 days a week, I walk downtown to the mental health center, see them people there, tell them all the little things that are bothering me, what I'm doing to try to keep control of my temper and whatnot.
There's only two things that we have in this life, people. Word and heart. Somebody in your life told you keep your word. Keep your word. Keep your word, son. Heart. It's two things that we have, although they try, although Satan tries, although they try, whatever it be, they can't take it from you.
Also have just a lot of people that have fallen on hard times. They had a job, they lost the job or got sick, ended up losing the job. If they don't get work soon enough, they lose their apartment. Sometimes they'll end up sleeping in cars, and we have a lot of homeless people in the city of Burbank sleeping in cars, although it's illegal to do so in the city, but they find places that they feel like they're safe in their car. And I think one of the saddest things that I've encountered dealing with the homeless is when they are living in the car, all their possessions are now in their car, and the car gets towed for one reason or another. They've lost their home, their stuff, their IDs. And a homeless person whose car is towed has no chance of getting it back. They'll have the ticket for whatever caused them to be towed in the first place, and then the storage charges, I think, start at $150. So it's gone. They had what little they had left is now gone.
last night, okay? Because we had another trauma here. We had our damn car towed away. You know, why? Why is this? Because when things lives down there, you can't afford things. Everything is so expensive.
They send you to the employment office. They know I'm too old to work. They send you to the Social Security office. All right, I've been down there. I've done that. I've done it all. And then you got to have a make appointment to go there. I can't walk that far to go down there. That's why I don't even bother going down there. I make it from here to up where I live, and I'm lucky to make it that way. That's why I got my walker.
Nobody in their right mind would want to be homeless in this country. They're living with little or no money, no friends, no family, no support system. It's the second hardest thing that you can ever do in this country other than going to war. And that's why when I find homeless people who have given up on themselves, they've lost some of their self-esteem, and they don't think that life is going to get better, and they say, well, you know, my focus is like a recovering alcoholic, living one day at a time. My goal for today is to get 3 hots in a cot, 3 hot meals in a cot. So they live for today and not for tomorrow, and that's not a good way for anyone to live.
If society doesn't step up to the plate and start helping our own, instead of all these countries giving all this aid and all this benefit, and you can't even help a child or a man or woman here, what's wrong with our society today? It's just it's really screwed up. Because we would rather help all these millions of people across the seas, which I have no problem with helping people, but it starts at home first. And before we need to take care of home before we take care of abroad.
We shouldn't have to live like that, live like this here in America. I mean, it's supposed to be a land of opportunity. And the only thing I can see is they letting other people from other countries come in.
Excuses that'll come forward as to what we cannot do today for the homeless problem. In my opinion, our voters need to step in on this. And I even myself think that as a designated voter, as well as a taxpayer, perhaps we can have a voluntary tax by people who can say, listen, I'm willing to tax myself in my return for a certain amount of money, as long as that money is funneled directly into the effort of helping the homeless. And therefore it is not a required tax, it's a self-imposed tax.
Give to the poor.
How tragic it is. I don't understand where this country is going. I really don't.
American people, I like them, but not the government.
If you go to that school now and they throwing away loads of bologna, ham, boxes of onions, cases of fresh fruit in the dumpster so they can get the new bill, instead of feeding people.
We care about our community. But it's like, when people in the community is not aware or there's limitations and stuff like that, I mean, what do you do?
There are laws against sleeping in certain public areas. There are laws against panhandling.
One of the problems with the homeless solution is that the HUD dollars, as they trickle down through the federal system to the state, to the local governments, is that low-income housing grabs up all those valuable dollars, and yet the people who have no income are left without alternatives.
But we also need to really focus on innovative programs, I think, which can go take people off the street and give them the treatment or assistance they need. For example, a homeless family just might need some money or a deposit to get an apartment. Sometimes people are making money, they're actually working every day, but they can't afford an apartment. They might need some rent assistance. Those who are addicted to drugs or alcohol need to get into a treatment program, and then we need to help them make an adjustment, get a job, get back into society. People with mental illness, we need to do more to coordinate, again, with local law enforcement, people who are coming into contact with them in the community, and mental health programs. But we need to tailor those programs for the specific needs of these individuals.
And then put into place those programs and resources which give them a sense of empowerment and a sense of accomplishment. I don't think anyone's even thinking about those things right now.
If you're on the street, certainly every illness you have is aggravated by being on the street. So you're usually, they don't have their medicine, they don't have enough to eat. Depending on the weather, it might be it's too hot or it's too cold. Little things that wouldn't, if you're homeless, become infections. Spider bites, they're victims of trauma. They're robbed and beat up, and I guess I noticed there were a lot of different problems related to being homeless, and kind of wanted to find out more about it. What are people doing to help? And it's 10 years later, it's still a big problem. It's a bigger problem.
A lot of people don't understand about this homeless crisis. It's not about jobs, it's not about housing, it's not about any of that. It's about a psychosis. There's something inherently wrong with America that people choose to live like this and to go to have a job. They could go to work. A lot of people could, but they don't want to anymore. They've had it with our society.
I found out the hard way. I was out at the Wongkok one day, washing, asking people if I could wash their windows for spare change. And I had a friendly gentleman that worked for this illustrious city and county introduced me to the pavement for about 5-10 minutes, laying there kissing the concrete, while they told me that I can fly a sign and sit there with my sign out. I can go up and beg people. I can ask you for money, but I can't offer to wash your windows to earn money. There's something wrong with this system.
And you see, black and white's broken. Here's a rubber plate, gone, broken, black and white. They broke my jaw, cracked my ribs, hung me in the fence over there and beat the shit out of me. Down at Beverly and Alvarado, they beat the shit out of me. I got some white punk son of a bitch showed me a badge and told me he was a cop, And I said that badge don't mean shit to me. Anybody can have a badge, right? And black and white beat the shit out.
And we just recently named Los Angeles one of the top 20 meanest cities in the country in terms of how the city officials and the police department is treating homeless people by doing sweeps and arresting and harassing homeless people. So we're very familiar with what's going on in Los Angeles. And they say that LA is the homeless capital of the country because in LA County, I've seen estimates as large as 100,000 people are homeless in LA County.
State and local government, for example, I talked about this program that the county sheriff has been spearheading to try to help identify homeless folks who are mentally ill instead of putting them into jail, getting them treatment. We need to have more of that type of cooperation.
When you look back in history, when Sir Robert Peel wrote about the role of a police officer, he largely described the role not in terms of radio cars and handcuffs and technology and all the things that we now need to have today to get our job done, but he described the role as one of a social worker, someone who was involved in the community, who helped people who were at risk. And one of the great populations at risk today is the homeless.
Point of admission, the mentally ill or the homeless individual is identified, and discharge planning begins at the point of incarceration. As soon as they're in, as soon as they're processed, their needs are identified, and that planning begins. And I think the initial data on what we've done so far is very promising, that when you take care of that person at the front end, number one, you can stabilize them because they're in jail. You can identify the needs, begin working on the needs, and then when they're released, they're more than likely not as vulnerable to reoffend. And so I think that that's been a real useful thing that we've just funded actually, and it seems to be very promising.
This is the United States, and this is a crime and it's a travesty. And on the poem, the Statue of Liberty says to the world, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. The wretched refuse on your teeming shores, send these. The homeless, the tempest tossed to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door." And that golden door is the golden door of opportunity. Liberty knew that if you give people who were destitute, people who were the offscourging of society, the outcasts of society, if you would give those people freedom, give them liberty and a safe environment in which to exercise that liberty and that freedom, they will work out of need, and that need will create invention, because necessity is the mother of invention. And that's why America is great today and became great so quickly. And for us today to ignore the homeless and to outlaw American citizens because they're homeless is to betray everything that our country has been founded upon and stood for. It is to betray our homeless ancestors. That's why I'm so passionate about this thing.
Where I used to be a senior engineer. When I left Vietnam, I went to Long Beach University and I got my degree, so everything is all over now.
Now, all of Western society has about 100 million homeless, according to the United Nations surveys. How did this happen? How did it sneak up on us in a period of unparalleled wealth and technology?
When somebody's never been homeless and they go, you know what? You don't need to be homeless. There's too many opportunities. Yeah, but if a man didn't have a place to sleep, or clean himself, or re-educate himself, or things of that nature, just simple things of life, and the man feels like he has nothing to live for.
And once you get some help, you can start getting up on your feet and live your life like a person's supposed to live.
But when you're dealing with people and you're dealing with the devastation people are experiencing because of the lack of a home, home is where the heart is, where your heart gets kind of broken when you ain't got one.
What is the constituent base of a problem? Whether it's children that are homeless, women that are homeless, veterans, drug using people, and people who have had down luck on employment, that all contributes to this. And we in America need to do better, and the Sheriff's Department is a part of solving these problems.
We had a national housing policy starting at the advent of World War II, and it extended all the way to 1981 when the Reagan administration stopped it.
It's a vicious cycle, and people don't realize it. They don't realize the tragedy that's out there. And when you look at us, here we are, such a rich country, and yet what do we do about the people that are homeless? It's, I don't care what anybody says, it is that not in my backyard. I don't want them. Gee, what a shame that person is out on the corner and they don't have a place. But I don't want them. I don't want them in my neighborhood.
A homeless person is a person, I've known lawyers, doctors, and everything else on the street. I have. Judges, I know a judge down there, he's homeless. I know, Mom.
And it's been on like now a month, okay? And I've got to get my kid out of this situation, but God, I don't know how I'm getting myself out of it to get him away from that. And so consequently, there's like all these papers surrounding me here. So I'm looking for jobs, looking for, you know, anything and everything, any kind of agency that could probably help, could really help.
There's a lot. They have a specific shelter here for families, and I understand sometimes the waiting list can be 3 to 6 months. So I know it's grown and grown. You see families on the street, but it seems like we're seeing more women with children, and they don't have a lot of resources. If you don't have family you can lean back on, if you don't have a lot of job skills, it's hard for folks to come up with $2,000 down to try to get in an apartment and all the things that come with that. So there's not a lot of affordable housing, and some folks actually, there's one theory that you if you're sick without insurance, you can become homeless because you can't pay the bills, you get evicted. So it kind of loops back and forth.
I don't think anyone's even thinking about those things right now. I was just told there's a federal study, and we study things to death sometimes rather than do anything about them, that said that at some point or another 10 million Americans have been homeless. That's a large chunk of our population. And now that we know that, I think we need to figure out what it is that needs to be done for this population. They're not homogeneous. They all have individual needs. We're talking about individual human beings, among whom, in fact, the largest the newest group of homeless are mothers with children who have no male to help with support. You know, we're building a whole generation now of children who have no roots in a community, who live out of cars or live out of boxes or live in temporary shelters where I'm sure they're exposed to a good deal of harm, and who are not going to be educated or trained to deal with the world in the 21st century. What happens to those children? Those are my concerns.
They laid across the sea. Some of them's laid on the floor. I look back there, they were laying all across the sea on the floor.
And I've been on the streets for about 3 months now. And it's not fun, it's very scary.
The biggest tragedy, the most terrifying part of this reality, with almost 2 million people on the streets today, is the impact of that reality on our children, on kids. You know, I think if you look hard, you can see it in the eyes of kids, that they know that this means something to them about what it's like, what the adults are like that surround them. And the worst part of that, I think, is not just that they conclude that the adults are heartless. I think that they conclude that the adults are incompetent. And maybe they conclude that they belong to an incompetent species.
What is this? When are we going to start addressing these things? You know what I mean? Really addressing these things.
That's how it is around, just trying to stay alive.
Being homeless, you can't meet your proper needs. For as your physical hygienes and the way you look or dress, and you can't keep it up. See, being homeless, unless you have to have a change of clothes.
Hey, the government know. They've been doing it ever since they founded this shit. Ain't nothing new. But if you want to hear it from the homeless, and somebody, if you want to hear the truth, and I am homeless, and my parents, everything you see here, come out that trash, and I sleep and I feel. I get up, wash my face, brush my teeth, I got my pride, dignity, and I respect. Take care of my personal hygiene the best way I can.
That's what they expect people to use. Now,
do you know where the corruption begins? In headquarters.
I think we have an obligation to care for people. And I think that as elected officials, government people, advocates, we have to take an honest and candid look at what we do and find out where the holes are and how to fill those gaps.
And I think it's going to require a change state policy to start providing some solutions. But I'm very optimistic. The amount of dialogue about the issue has been increasing over the last several years. Often an issue requires a certain ripeness before it reaches any kind of resolution. And I think mental health and mental illness and homelessness have reached that point of ripeness that the legislature may be prepared to act.
Yeah, it's been about 10 years since I've been out here, you know, out on the streets like that.
I eat when I can, and if not, I go to the dumpsters. I mean, it's real. I'm not going to go hungry. I need energy to work. And that's, you know, I don't care what people say. If I have to go in a dumpster, I go in a dumpster.
On the other hand, to gather and force them into one specific place where they are subjected to some of the highest concentrations of bacteria any place on earth. It's not only polluting our harbors, it's polluting the lives of the people who have to live in it. And to subject someone forcibly to live in filth and to live in poor medical conditions, to shorten their lives, this specifically violates the Genocide Convention, the International Genocide Convention. So genocide was not only the Holocaust, it is also directed at downtown LA, Skid Row, and what makes it up, and why the people are gathered there. It isn't just because they want to be, it's because they have no choice. That's the only place they can go to get food, to get shelter, to get blankets, to get medical care in its most primitive and rudimentary forms.
I recall almost 40 years ago visiting in India and getting up very early in the morning and seeing people rise out of the fields and being shocked and appalled at the number of homeless people in India. Then as time went on, I began to see more and more homeless people in America. And I realized that it wasn't enough simply to have sympathy for those outside our borders, but to realize that we have a very serious problem here in the United States. There are millions of people that are homeless. Sometimes it's easy for us to isolate ourselves from them and even to blame them for their homelessness, that surely we think that maybe their indolence or something else has caused the homelessness. The reality is that probably a third of the people that are homeless in America are mentally ill. These are individuals that through no fault of their own are suffering with mental illness. Others have substance abuse. The fastest rising segment of the homeless population are women and children. And you know, the reality is that we are a total society, that I can't isolate myself from the poor, from the mentally ill, from the homeless, that simply because those particular problems don't impact my household doesn't mean that it doesn't impact my larger family, which is, of course, America.
If we can put a man on the moon in 10 years, surely we could put a man in a home in 10 years.
I can imagine being a little child and having to be put on the street and scared, or sleeping in a park, or seeing, you know, your parents go through such terrible things. I mean, it's terrible for me, but I can't imagine what it must be like for a child. And I think the government and the officials should do something about spending more money in California and LA County as well, and locally, to help out the people like myself and us, but more importantly for the families, I think. Because, you know, the money's there, you know, they've spent it on all these stupid programs that they have, or research for this and that, and when they should be spending it to help families and, you know, single people like myself.
Just take one step at a time.
And I always remind people, some people think homelessness is just a weird thing that happens to some sort of strange person, but it happens to our neighbors, our relatives. people in our community all the time, and we need to be a lot more sensitive about that. They're not freaks, they're not weirdos. Most of them are people who are down on their luck and need a hand and deserve our compassion, knowing that we would hope if something happened to us and put us in that situation, that someone would come to us, help us, and get us back on our feet.
I try to do a little pickup work, which I was just trying to do when I was frustrated, you know. Right. And if I can't get no pickup work, I'll grab some water and paper if I have to, and clean windows. And anything I can do, if I have to sweep a gutter, if I have to dump trash, I don't care what it is, so I can eat. You know, I try not to get handouts as least as possible, you know. And just do the best I possibly can.
Kind of tend to knit together as little communities. Sometimes you have people that don't see eye to eye. Last night I saw one homeless gentleman knock another one to the ground, you know.
And with great respect, I haven't seen hardly any action. I've seen, you know, it's a scandal that we don't get the leadership from the top.
And the kind of stereotypes that we have about homeless people today in 2003 are the same stereotypes that we had about members of minority groups, other minority groups, 40, 50 years ago. So when you ask anybody, the typical American, well, why do people become homeless? They'll mention substance abuse, they'll mention faulty check writing habits, they'll mention mental illness, they'll mention alcoholism. But we believe that the fundamental causes of homelessness in this country, the lack of affordable housing, the lack of universal health care, the lack of a living wage. If we dealt with those root causes, we could cut the homeless population in half.
I think I'm alive, and won't give me no chance.
Becoming homeless really opened my eyes to being of, it's just not a little nutshell that you crack and fix. It's not a fix to everything.
Of course, I'm never gonna ever allow myself to be in this position, but it's kind of bad.
This is no joke.
Yeah.
When the housing program was decimated and replaced by 30-day vouchers for hotels or motels, and when families and mentally ill people or disabled people were thrown off those Social Security rolls and made to reapply, and their applications were routinely denied, and even under this administration continue to be, and people then have to follow an appeals process, which for a mentally ill person is an extremely difficult thing to do, especially if you're not receiving food, clothing, and shelter in the meantime. All of that contributes to continuing homelessness. In addition to that, there has been a movement throughout the country for at least 20 or 30 years to take downtown areas where homeless people congregated and make that property valuable by building large office buildings and developing the property in an economically productive way. The result of that, urban gentrification, has been a loss of housing resources for poor people. And where do they go? They go to the streets. And that's been the problem.
I went out to a mission to get me some food. And then I went back in. And I stayed there for a lot of days. Just stayed there. It was roaches and ants and stuff. I was trying to get them away, trying to keep them away from me and all that. So it was really aggravating, and I became very afraid of people. A lot of people, I looked so bad, a lot of people were afraid of me.